That's it. 1942 has already, in my eyes, the most fateful trial of our people. That was the winter 41 to 42. The worst is behind us, that we've conquered this winter, this general winter. That the German lines finally held firm, and that we could advance again this spring, that is, in this early summer, I believe, is proof that Providence was pleased with the German people. It was a very severe and hard trial and test, as you know, under the Sea Arcade. And yet, we didn't just survive this toughest time, we managed to calmly organize our attack divisions, the motorized and tank units, to reassemble and form up, all set to launch a further offensive. I believe, looking back, we can certainly be satisfied with the past 3 years. Our goals have always been very sober and clear-cut, often quite daring whenever we needed to take bold risks, thoughtful where we could afford to be thoughtful, deliberate where we had the time, cautious where we believed we had to be very cautious under all circumstances. But we've also been very bold where only boldness could have saved us. For this year, we've set up a very simple program. First, to hold on to everything that must be held at all costs. Second, to absolutely attack where an attack is necessary under all circumstances. Our goal is clear-cut: the destruction of the right arm of this international conspiracy of capitalism, plutocracy, and Bolshevism. The greatest threat that has loomed over our German people in recent times, one we've been defending against for over a year now, or rather, one we must now combat. And here, we've set ourselves several goals. And let me just briefly mention a few key phrases to make you and every German aware of what has been accomplished in these past few months. Our first objective was securing our dominant position in the Black Sea by definitively clearing the Crimean Peninsula. 2 battles, the Battle of Kirch and the Battle of Sevastopol. They served this purpose. If our enemies, and I may say this, had achieved even one such success in these 3 years, we would not be able to talk to them anymore, as they would no longer be on Earth, but floating in the clouds, puffed up with their own delusions, puffed up with vanity. After we sorted that out, we found it necessary to remove a bulge that had formed at the Volga. It was encircled, and the enemy was destroyed or captured. Then came the next task, preparing for the breakthrough to the Don. Meanwhile, this adversary chose a major operational objective of their own, namely to break through from Kharkov to the banks of the Dnieper, aiming to collapse our entire southern front. You might recall the zeal with which our opponents pursued these operations. They culminated in 3 battles with the complete annihilation of more than 75 of our Russian adversaries' divisions. Following that, we initiated our own major offensive. The goal was firstly to take away the last major wheat-producing areas from the enemy. Secondly, to take away from him the last remnants of coal that can be utilized. Thirdly, to approach his oil sources, to seize them, or at least to block them off. The attack was then to be carried on. Fifthly, to cut off their very last and greatest line of communication, namely the Volga. And here we set our sights on that region lying between the bend of the Don River and the Volga itself, and the place, Stalingrad, not because it bears Stalin's name, that's completely irrelevant to us, but solely because it is a strategically important location. And because we were clear that by cutting off the Dnieper, the Don, and the Volga as transport routes for Russia, it would be about the same and only worse as it would be for Germany if we were to lose the Rhine, the Elbe, the Oder, and the Danube. Because on this massive river, the Volga, about 30 million tons of goods are transported in just 6 months, which is as much as the entire annual traffic on the Rhine. And now it's been cut off for quite some time. The capture of Stalingrad, which will also be completed, will only deepen and reinforce these rules. And you can be sure that no one will be able to move us from this spot. As for the further objectives, you'll understand when I say I won't discuss them, because these are goals currently being pursued. Mr. Churchill is the one who talks about them. But the moment will come when the German nations will also have full clarity about these further goals. I must say to you, seventhly, that we have now set ourselves the further task of organizing this gigantic expanse that we now occupy. Because it's not just about saying that we've marched so many thousands of kilometers, but what matters to us is actually securing this vast space for our war efforts, and in a broader sense, not just for feeding our people, securing our raw materials, but for preserving Europe as a whole. To that end, the transportation system had to be first put in order. There are tens of thousands of kilometers of railroad lines that we are now repairing or have already long since repaired. Thanks to our efforts, the diligence, the skill, and the dedication. Tens of thousands of German soldiers, railway engineers, members of the organization TODT, and other groups, for instance, the Reich Labor Service. This vast transport network, which is already mainly operational, again, on German tracks, was completely destroyed. It's not hundreds. It's thousands of bridges that had to be rebuilt, explosion sites that had to be cleared, transitions that had to be newly created. All of this has been accomplished in just a few months, or will be completed in a matter of weeks. Well, my fellow party members, you will understand one thing. There are people on the side of our opponents who ask, why do you suddenly hold position? Because we are cautious, because we don't just, let's say, run all the way to Benghazi or even farther, only to have to run back again. We only hold out as long as necessary to get our supplies back in order. That baffles those who lack military training. That's why they fail. but anyone with even a bit of military schooling will understand. They will have to admit that what we have overcome in terms of space in just a few months is truly unique in world history. And I say this because there might be some old reactionary grumbler among us who suddenly exclaims, well, what's this? They've been standing there for 8 days now. Yes, my dear stick in the mud, you're simply out of touch. You should try getting the traffic back in order yourself. The German people, I know, are concerned. The entire nation's unwavering trust in its military leadership and the performance of its soldiers, knowing that we never hold our ground without good reason. But we're not just getting the traffic back in order. We also have to build roads, because unfortunately, the blessed land of the proletarians and the peasants has no roads, or just fragments of them. Those need to be built too. The first truly massive roads will be constructed by our organizations there. In these areas, we have to push through and build roads through sheer government. Regions where it was previously thought that no transportation could occur at all. And everyone says, sure, the Russian manages to get through as well. That's just the nature of the marshland man. We have to admit, he's not a European. It's a bit more challenging for us to get through this mire than it is for the people born to it. The indigenous people may be used to it, but for us, it's a different story. Secondly, we're also organizing our agriculture there. That means we're opening up the area. And it's not as simple as just sowing and harvesting. We have to make sure the produce gets to the railroad across endless distances so they can be loaded there, that we switch over part of this economy completely. The thousands of tractors that are damaged or eliminated are replaced or improved, or another substitute is found. And I can only tell you, what has been achieved here is nothing short of colossal. The very same soldiers are fighting just a few kilometers behind the front lines, already wielding sickles and scythes. They're already tilling the fields again, and behind them are the deployment units of our agricultural organizations. With the first, albeit modest, results of this course of action, we've been fortunate to already share with the German people. But rest assured, we're just getting started. This last year was a year of conflict, an awful winter, and now we're fighting once again. But by next year, this region will be much better organized. We know how to sort that out. And then there's the matter of freeing the population from the pressure of Bolshevik power, which still fills millions of people there with despair, or rather, with fear, beyond what one can barely imagine in Germany or in other countries. It is the fear of the Kommissar. It is the fear of the government, the fear of the GPU, the fear of the entire regime, which still fills millions of people. All of this must be gradually remedied and will be remedied. And there are many areas where the entire population is willing. Millions are working with us, and in other areas, they are already fighting alongside us. The outcomes of all this immense activity, which I've briefly outlined through a few short snapshots. There's also enormous activities that I briefly demonstrate that well, hero scenarios are missed. What is in the West, in all difference, we thereby fulfill one of the most unique beginnings, prioritization of Europe for war and peace war. One of the most formidable prerequisites for the organization of Europe for war and for this war, for those who fight alongside us, Romanians, Hungarians, Croatians, Slovaks, and especially in the north, the Finns, Spaniards, and so on. If we consider all of them together, we can truly say that this is already a European crusade today. And there are also the Germanic volunteers in our Waffen-SS and individual legions from European states. It's a crusade indeed. It is truly Europe that has come together here, just as in ancient times, once against the Huns or the Mongol invasions,